don't know true betrayal until you watch your own flesh and blood carry your mattress into a freezing, uninsulated garage. I gave my son the roof over his head. He gave my bedroom to his in-laws. So I sold the roof right out from under them. 32 years. That is how long I bled for the house on Oak Creek Lane. I didn't just pay the mortgage. I bled into the floorboards. I hung the drywall in the basement. I replaced the water heater on a Thanksgiving weekend when the basement flooded, standing in 3 inches of freezing water while my wife Helen shined a flashlight from the stairs. I planted the oak tree in the front yard the day my son Leo was born. When Helen passed from pancreatic cancer 5 years ago, the house became too big. The echoes were loud, but it was mine. It was paid off. It was the only tangible proof I had that my life amounted to something solid. Then came the phone call. Leo, 28, married for 2 years to Sarah, and drowning in rent. Dad, we're suffocating, Leo had said, his voice tight over the phone. Rent went up another $400. We're never going to save for a down payment at this rate. Just a year, Dad. 18 months tops. We'll cover groceries and utilities. We just need to breathe. I said yes. What father wouldn't? You spend your whole life programming yourself to be the safety net. You don't turn off that instinct just because your kid has a wedding ring and a beard. The first 6 months were an exercise in slow, quiet erasure. It wasn't a hostile takeover. It was an invasion by 1,000 tiny adjustments. First, it was the coffee maker. My stained, reliable drip machine was boxed up and replaced by a chrome monstrosity that took pods and sounded like an asthmatic robot. Then it was the living room. Helen's floral armchair was pushed into the basement to make room for a minimalist gray sectional that felt like sitting on a cinder block. I didn't complain. It was their youth, their style. I retreated to my master bedroom, my sanctuary. I had my reading chair, my heavy oak dresser, and the king-size bed where I had spent my last night with Helen. As long as I had that room, I could tolerate the smell of Sarah's overpowering vanilla candles and the constant drone of reality television from downstairs. Then came the Sunday dinner. Sarah had cooked a roast. She was overly attentive, filling my wine glass before I could even take a meaningful sip. Leo couldn't look me in the eye. He kept rearranging the peas on his plate. I knew the physical mechanics of my son's guilt. He's had that same twitch in his jaw since he was 6 years old and broke a window with a baseball. Dad, Leo started, clearing his throat. Sarah's parents, Richard and Pam, they're in a bit of a tight spot. I set my fork down. How tight? Sarah jumped in, her voice dripping with practiced diplomacy. Their landlord is selling their condo. They have nowhere to go, Thomas. The market is insane right now. They just need a bridge. A couple of months to figure things out. A bridge, I repeated. I looked at the table. 4 adults in a 4-bedroom house. 1 room was mine. 1 was theirs. 1 was a home office for Sarah. 1 was a gym for Leo. And where exactly is this bridge being built? We'll clear out the gym, Leo said quickly. Put an air mattress in there. It'll be tight, but it's family, right? We have to help family. Family. The ultimate loaded gun. You can't duck when someone fires that word at you. I looked at my son, seeing the desperation in his eyes, the subtle pressure Sarah was applying under the table. I sighed, feeling the weight of my 60 years pressing down on my shoulders. 2 months, I said, and they clean up after themselves. Absolutely, Sarah beamed. You won't even know they're here. That was the biggest lie told under my roof since Leo told me he hadn't smoked a cigarette in the garage when he was 16. Richard and Pam didn't arrive with a few suitcases. They arrived with a moving truck. They brought heavy, dark mahogany furniture, boxes of porcelain figurines, and a sense of entitlement that consumed all the oxygen in the house. Richard was a loud, red-faced man who treated every conversation like a negotiation he was determined to win. Pam was a chronic complainer whose default state of being was mild victimization. Within 3 days, Richard had commandeered the television remote and my favorite spot on the patio. Within a week, Pam had reorganized the kitchen pantry, throwing away my expired spices I had bought specifically for Helen's chili recipe. I swallowed the bile. I took long walks. I reminded myself it was temporary. I went up to my master bedroom, shut the solid oak door, and locked the world out. My room was the border they could not cross. It was the one piece of the house that remained undeniably mine until I went out of town. It was the second week of October. The leaves were turning that burnt, bruised orange. I went up to a cabin near the lake with an old buddy from the plant, a guy named Mike. 3 days of fishing, drinking bad beer, and not listening to Richard shout at cable news anchors. It was the first time I felt my jaw unclench in 2 months. I drove back on a Sunday afternoon. The sky was overcast, spitting a cold, fine mist. My truck tires crunched on the gravel of my driveway. There were 4 cars parked out front, blocking me from pulling into my usual spot. I had to park on the street. I walked up the front steps, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, a stringer of frozen trout in a cooler in my other hand. The front door was locked. I fished my keys out, pushed the brass key into the deadbolt, and turned. It didn't catch. The cylinder was different. It was shiny, new. I stood there in the freezing mist for a full 10 seconds, staring at the doorknob. A cold prickle started at the base of my neck. I rang the doorbell. Footsteps approached. The door swung open. It wasn't Leo. It wasn't Sarah. It was Pam, wearing a plush pink bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon, holding a mug of tea. She blinked at me as if I were a vacuum salesman. "Oh, Thomas, you're back early," she said, not moving out of the doorway. "It's my house, Pam. I don't have an arrival schedule. Why does my key not work?" "Oh, the lock was sticking," she said breezily, waving a hand. "Richard swapped it out yesterday. It's a smart lock now. You just need the app." "The app," I said, my voice dead flat. "Yes. Come in, you're letting the cold air in." She stepped aside. I walked into the foyer. The house smelled entirely of bleach and cheap floral air freshener. The hallway runner, a Persian rug Helen and I had bought on our 10th anniversary, was gone, replaced by a gray synthetic runner. I didn't say another word to Pam. I dropped my cooler. I walked straight up the stairs, my heavy boots thudding against the wood. I bypassed the guest rooms and headed straight for the end of the hall. My master bedroom. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The breath left my lungs. The heavy oak dresser was gone. My reading chair was gone. Helen's vanity mirror was gone. In their place was a towering, ornate sleigh bed. Frilly, aggressively patterned curtains hung over the windows. The walls, which had been a calming sage green for a decade, were half-painted a sterile, blinding white, with drop cloths on the floor. Richard was standing on a stepladder in the corner, rolling paint onto my wall. He was wearing my old gardening sweatpants. He looked over his shoulder. "Hey, Tom, didn't hear you come in. How was the lake?" I looked at him. I looked at the sleigh bed. I felt a strange, terrifying stillness wash over me. It wasn't rage. Rage is hot and chaotic. This was absolute, sub-zero clarity. "Where is my bed, Richard?" Richard climbed down from the ladder, wiping his hands on a rag. He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but only slightly. "Listen, you need to talk to Leo about this. Pam's back has been acting up terribly. That air mattress in the gym was killing her. And the guest room, well, it doesn't have an ensuite bathroom. At our age, we need proximity. Where is my bed?" I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. "Garage," a voice said from behind me. I turned. Leo was standing in the hallway. He looked pale. He was wringing his hands, looking at the baseboards. Sarah was standing a few feet behind him, arms crossed, her jaw set in a defiant line. I walked past Leo. I didn't push him, but he scrambled out of my way like I was made of fire. I walked down the stairs, through the kitchen, and opened the heavy fire door that led to the attached 2-car garage. I flicked on the fluorescent overhead lights. They flickered, buzzing loudly, casting a harsh, pale glare over the concrete. There it was, my life shoved into a corner. My king-size bed was wedged between a stack of Sarah's winter tires and a rusted lawnmower. My oak dresser was pushed against the uninsulated cinder block wall, Helen's vanity was buried under boxes of Richard's golf clubs. The garage smelled of gasoline, damp cardboard, and cold earth. The temperature was barely 50 degrees. I stood there for a long time. I looked at the oil stains on the concrete floor just 3 feet from my pillow. I looked at the exposed rafters where spiders built thick, dusty webs. The door opened behind me. Leo stepped out, wrapping a sweater around himself against the chill. "Dad," he started, his voice a pathetic, reedy whine. "I'm sorry. I really am." But Sarah was losing her mind. Her mom was crying every morning about her sciatica. "It's just temporary." We put down a rug. I looked down. There was a cheap, thin area rug tossed haphazardly over the concrete beside the bed. "You moved my bed into the garage, Leo. You have the whole space to yourself out here," Sarah called out from the doorway, not daring to step fully onto the cold concrete. "It's basically a studio apartment. We'll get you a space heater tomorrow, and it's only until my parents find a place. We're all making sacrifices, Thomas." I turned my head and looked at Sarah. "Sacrifices? You are living rent-free in the house I paid for. Your parents are sleeping in the bedroom I built. My wife's belongings have been tossed in here like garbage. Tell me, Sarah, what exactly have you sacrificed today? A matching lock on the front door?" Sarah flushed red. "That is not fair. We are family. We have to accommodate each other." "Dad." Leo stepped closer, reaching a hand out but dropping it before it touched my shoulder. "Please, don't make a scene. Just give us a month to sort this out. I'll buy you the best space heater on the market, I promise." I looked at my son. I saw the boy who used to sit on my shoulders at parades. I saw the teenager I taught to drive stick shift in the high school parking lot. And then I saw the man standing in front of me, spineless, compliant, willing to throw his own father to the cold concrete to avoid an argument with his wife. The heartbreak was instantaneous, and it was final. Something inside me snapped cleanly in two. The father who would have burned himself alive to keep his son warm died in that freezing garage. "Don't worry about the heater, Leo," I said quietly. I walked over to my bed, sat down on the mattress, and took off my boots. Leo sighed, a sound of profound relief. He thought he had won. He thought I had capitulated. "Thanks, Dad. I owe you. I really owe you." He walked back inside and shut the heavy fire door. The deadbolt clicked. I sat alone in the dim, buzzing light of the garage. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I leaned over, reached into my duffel bag, and pulled out my heavy winter sleeping bag. I laid it over my mattress. Then I reached into the breast pocket of my jacket and pulled out my phone. It was time to stop being a father and start being a landlord. The first night in the garage was a masterclass in physical misery and mental clarity. The cold seeped up through the concrete, bypassing the mattress and sinking directly into my bones. Every time the wind blew, the aluminum garage door rattled in its tracks like loose teeth. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the psychological torture of the acoustics. Through the thin drywall, I could hear them. I heard the muffled, booming laugh of Richard watching a late-night talk show in my living room. I heard the clinking of dishes as Sarah loaded the dishwasher. I heard the faint, rhythmic creaking of the floorboards directly above me, the guest room where Leo and Sarah slept. They were living their lives in a warm, brightly lit fortress, while the king of the castle was sleeping with the lawnmower. I didn't sleep. I lay on my back, watching a spider slowly descend from the rafters, illuminated by the amber glow of the street lamp, bleeding through the frosted garage window. I spent the hours taking a mental inventory. I owed $0 on the house. I had $45,000 in a savings account. My pension was steady. I was 62, in good health, with no criminal record and no attachments to this zip code other than a ghost and a son who had lost my respect. By 4 a.m., my plan was fully formed. It wasn't a plan born of hot, impulsive revenge. It was a cold, calculated business transaction. They wanted to treat my home like a free hotel. Fine. Hotels get sold. Monday morning, I waited until I heard Leo's car pull out of the driveway, followed shortly by Sarah's. Richard and Pam were notoriously late sleepers. I rose, put on my boots, and walked out the side door of the garage into the crisp morning air. I walked 4 blocks to a local diner, ordered a black coffee, and opened my phone. I didn't want a traditional real estate agent. I didn't want open houses, staging, or people baking cookies to make the place smell like home. I didn't want a for sale sign in the front yard tipping my hand. I wanted speed. I wanted silence. I searched for cash for homes, fast closing, as is. I found a company called Apex Property Solutions. The website was aggressive, promising an offer within 24 hours and closing in as little as 10 days. I called the number. A man named Mitchell answered. He sounded like he was chewing on a cigar, even though I knew he probably wasn't. Apex, this is Mitchell. I have a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-story house on Oak Creek Lane, I said, keeping my voice low. No mortgage, clear title. I want to sell it for cash, as is, and I want to do it fast. Condition? Mitchell asked, his tone shifting into predatory focus. Good bones. Roof is 5 years old. HVAC is 3. Kitchen is dated. Has some unwanted tenants currently occupying it. You'd be buying it with them inside. You handle the eviction. Mitchell chuckled. A dry, scraping sound. Buddy, I buy crack houses with squatters chained to the radiators. A few stubborn tenants don't scare me, but you know the drill. If I'm taking on the headache of an eviction and a cash close, I'm not paying market value. I know, I said. I don't care about market value. I care about a quiet sale. When can you look at it? I can be there tomorrow at 10 a.m. Make it Wednesday at 1 p.m., I countered. I knew Sarah had a mandatory in-office day on Wednesdays. Leo worked until 5, and Richard and Pam went to a senior center bingo game every Wednesday afternoon like clockwork. The house would be entirely empty. Wednesday at 1 it is. Have the deed ready to prove ownership, Tom. I spent the next 2 days living as a ghost in my own home. I only went inside to use the bathroom and shower when I knew everyone was asleep. I ate protein bars and sandwiches I kept in the garage mini fridge I used for bait. Whenever Leo came out to check on me, offering a tight, guilty smile and a mug of coffee, I played the part. I acted defeated. I slouched my shoulders. I mumbled short, non-committal answers. You holding up okay, Dad? Leo asked on Tuesday night, standing by the garage door, shivering in his slippers. The space heater should arrive from Amazon tomorrow. I'm fine, Leo. Just tired, I said, not looking at him. It's just for a little while, he repeated, trying to convince himself. You're a good man, Dad. Go back inside, Leo. It's cold. Wednesday arrived. At 12:45 p.m., I watched from the small garage window as Richard and Pam backed their Buick out of the driveway and puttered down the street. The house was empty. At 1 p.m. sharp, a black SUV pulled up. Mitchell stepped out. He was a tall, sharp-featured guy in a tailored suit that looked completely out of place in my middle-class neighborhood. He carried a clipboard and a laser measuring tape. I unlocked the side door and let him in. We didn't shake hands. We just got to work. I walked him through the house. I watched his eyes scan the crown molding I had installed, the hardwood floors I had sanded and stained. He didn't care about the memories. He only saw square footage and margins. It was exactly what I needed. We went upstairs. I opened the door to the master bedroom. Richard and Pam had completely ruined it. There were floral doilies on the nightstands, and the room smelled overwhelmingly of medicinal rub and old perfume. Big room. Ensuite bath, Mitchell noted, jotting something down. Who are the tenants? My son, his wife, and her parents, I said flatly. Mitchell stopped writing. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. His eyes flicked from my worn flannel shirt to the hard, dead expression on my face. A slow, understanding smirk spread across his lips. In his line of work, he had seen every ugly facet of human nature. Family screwing over family was just a Tuesday to him. I see, Mitchell said softly. And the arrangement? No lease, no rent paid, month-to-month verbal at best. Legally, they are holdover guests. You hand them a 30-day notice to quit the second the ink is dry on the deed. Brutal, Mitchell said, not without a hint of admiration. They put my bed in the uninsulated garage, I replied. Mitchell raised an eyebrow, closed his clipboard, and nodded. Fair enough. We went back down to the kitchen. Mitchell leaned against the granite counter I had bought for Helen on our 25th anniversary. Market value is around $450, Mitchell said, tapping his pen. With a standard sale, inspections, agent fees, you walk away with maybe 4 to 10. I'm buying it as is, cash, and I'm taking on the cost of the legal eviction. I'll give you $340,000, cash, wired to your account in 8 days. It was a staggering hit. Over $100,000 of equity vanished into thin air. A younger man, a more desperate man, might have negotiated. But I wasn't buying an investment. I was buying an execution. 340, I said, my voice steady. But I have 2 conditions. Name them. First, the sale is completely confidential until closing. No letters to the house. No appraisers walking through while they are home. You do everything from the outside. Done. I'm a cash buyer. I am my own appraiser. What's the second? When the sale closes and you own the house, I want to be the one standing next to you when you serve them the eviction notice. Mitchell barked a laugh. It was a genuine sound of amusement. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of paperwork. Thomas, Mitchell said, sliding the contract across the counter. It will be my absolute pleasure. I pulled a pen from my pocket. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about the oak tree in the front yard or the drywall in the basement. I thought about the cold concrete floor of the garage. I signed my name. The clock started ticking. 8 days. 8 days of playing the beaten, broken old man in the garage. 8 days of watching Richard drink my beer and Pam complain about the draft in the kitchen. They thought they had won the house. They didn't know they were just temporarily haunting a house that belonged to a stranger. The Amazon delivery truck backed into the driveway on a Thursday. Leo brought the box into the garage, his face plastered with a strained, overly eager smile. It was a space heater, a sleek, oscillating ceramic tower. Top of the line, Dad, Leo said, setting it down on the concrete near my boots. It has a thermostat and an automatic shutoff if it tips over. You'll be sweating out here by midnight. Thanks, Leo, I said. I didn't look up from the reel I was respooling with fishing line. He lingered. He wanted absolution. He wanted me to clap him on the shoulder, tell him he was a good son, and pretend that buying a $60 plastic appliance erased the fact that he had banished his father to a concrete cell. I let him stand in the awkward silence until the chill drove him back inside. I plugged the heater in. It whirred to life, blowing a stream of dry, metallic-smelling air directly at my knees. 10 minutes later, the garage plunged into total darkness. The heater had tripped the breaker. I sat in the pitch black for a long time, listening to the wind rattle the aluminum door, before I finally stood up, fumbled for my flashlight, and flipped the switch in the panel. I didn't plug the heater back in. I preferred the honest cold over a broken promise. The next 6 days were a masterclass in psychological endurance. I watched my house get consumed. On Saturday, Richard decided he needed to clear out space in the garage for his vintage Buick. I was sitting on my mattress when he marched in, wearing a puffy vest and carrying a roll of heavy-duty trash bags. He started tossing things from the far corner, old paint cans, a broken weed whacker. Then he picked up a rusted, green metal toolbox, Helen's gardening box. "Whoa, Richard," I said, my voice cutting through the damp air. "Put that down." He paused, holding the box by the handle. "It's just junk, Tom. You're hoarding junk out here. I'm doing you a favor. I need to pull the Buick in before the frost hits." "Put my wife's toolbox down," I repeated, standing up. I was 2 inches taller than him and 40 pounds lighter, but I had 30 years of calluses on my hands from working in a stamping plant. Richard pushed paper for a logistics firm. He saw something in my eyes that made him hesitate. He set the box back on the concrete, raising his hands in mock surrender. "All right, buddy. Touchy. Just trying to clean up the squalor." He turned and went back inside. muttering about gratitude. I walked over, picked up the green toolbox, and slid it under my bed. I spent the rest of the weekend quietly packing. I didn't have much. My clothes fit into 2 duffel bags. My important papers, birth certificate, social security card, Helen's death certificate went into a fireproof lockbox. The house was full of furniture I had bought, appliances I had installed, and dishes we had eaten off of for decades. I didn't want any of it. It was all infected now. On Wednesday morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a notification from my bank. A wire transfer had cleared. The balance in my checking account had jumped from $45,210.14 to $385,210.14. I stared at the screen. The glowing numbers felt heavy. That was it. 32 years of mortgages, repairs, blood, and sweat reduced to a digital string of digits. I was no longer a homeowner. I was just an old man sitting in a garage. But I wasn't powerless anymore. I packed the last of my things into the back of my pickup truck. I left the mattress. I left the heavy oak dresser. I left the space heater. I sat in the cab of the truck, the engine off, and waited. At 5:30 p.m., the driveway was full. Leo's sedan was parked behind Sarah's SUV. Richard's Buick was idling on the street. The whole clan was gathered. Through the kitchen window, I could see the warm glow of the pendant lights. I could see Sarah tossing a salad. I could see Leo opening a bottle of wine. A picture-perfect, happy family. At 5:45 p.m., a black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb, right behind Richard's Buick. Mitchell stepped out. He was wearing a sharp navy suit and carrying a manila folder. He looked like a grim reaper with a real estate license. I stepped out of my truck and walked to meet him at the edge of the driveway. "Money clear?" he asked, adjusting his cuffs. "It cleared," I said. "Excellent." Mitchell tapped the folder against his leg. "I have the deed, the proof of transfer, and 4 copies of a 30-day notice to vacate, drafted by my attorney. You ready?" "More than ready." We walked up the front steps together. I didn't bother with a key. I pressed the doorbell. We heard the chime echo inside. Footsteps approached. The door swung open. Leo stood there, holding a corkscrew. He looked confused when he saw me standing on the porch, and even more confused when he saw Mitchell standing beside me. "Dad, why are you ringing the doorbell? Who's this?" "We need to come inside, Leo," I said, pushing past him into the foyer. Mitchell followed, his dress shoes clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. "Who is it, honey?" Sarah called out from the kitchen. She walked into the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Richard and Pam were right behind her, holding glasses of red wine. "Tom," Richard boomed, his face flushed. "You're tracking dirt in. And who's the suit?" I stood in the center of the living room, the room where my wife's armchair used to sit. I looked at the 4 of them. I let the silence stretch out, let the tension wrap around their throats until they started to shift uncomfortably. "This is Mitchell," I said, my voice dead calm. "He's the new owner of the house." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the synthetic gray runner. Sarah let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "What? Thomas, that's not a funny joke. Dinner is almost ready." "It's not a joke, ma'am," Mitchell said smoothly. He opened the manila folder and pulled out a stack of stapled papers. "As of 10 a.m. this morning, this property is legally owned by Apex Property Solutions. Thomas here signed the deed over to my firm last week. The funds have been transferred. The transaction is complete." Leo dropped the corkscrew. It hit the floor with a dull thud. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a terrified child. "You're lying," Richard snapped, stepping forward, his chest puffed out. "You can't just sell a house with people living in it. We have rights. We're tenants." "Actually," Mitchell countered, stepping smoothly into Richard's space and handing him a stack of papers, "you are holdover occupants without a lease. And as the new owner, I am legally required to give you 30 days written notice to vacate the premises. Consider yourselves served." He handed a copy to Sarah, who backed away as if the paper were on fire. He handed a copy to Leo, who took it with trembling hands. 30 days, Pam shrieked, clutching her pearl necklace. We can't move in 30 days. The market is impossible. We have nowhere to go. I suggest you start packing, Mitchell said, entirely unbothered. If you are not vacated by midnight on the 30th day, I will file a formal eviction with the county, and the sheriff will forcibly remove you and your belongings to the curb. I do not grant extensions. Dad, Leo finally choked out. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet. Dad, please, tell me this is a prank. Tell me you didn't do this. Where are we supposed to live? I looked at my son. I felt no triumph. I felt no joy. I just felt an overwhelming, heavy exhaustion. You're suffocating, Leo, I said softly, echoing the words he had used against me months ago. You told me you just needed a bridge, but you didn't want a bridge. You wanted to take my house, dismantle my life, and shove the pieces into the cold so you wouldn't have to face your wife and your in-laws. We're family, Sarah screamed, tears of rage spilling down her cheeks. How could you do this to your own son? To us. Family, I repeated. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. Family doesn't put a 62-year-old man on a concrete floor in an uninsulated garage. Family doesn't throw away his dead wife's belongings. You wanted to play house, Sarah. You wanted to be the lady of the manor. But you forgot one thing. I looked around the freshly painted walls, the new furniture, the aggressive floral curtains. You forgot who built the manor. You selfish old bastard, Richard spat, crumpling the eviction notice in his fist. You screwed your own kid over a bedroom? I sold an asset, I corrected him, staring him dead in the eye. And you, Richard, are just a bad investment I am officially writing off. I turned away from them. I walked toward the front door. Dad, wait, Leo yelled, lunging forward and grabbing my arm. His grip was tight, desperate. Please, I'll fix it. I'll make them leave. You can have the master bedroom back. We'll throw the sleigh bed out right now. Just buy it back from him, please. I looked down at his hand on my jacket. Then I looked up into his panicked, tear-streaked face. It's too late, Leo, I said quietly. You made your choice the day you let another man change the locks on my front door. I pulled my arm free. You wanted to be the man of the house, I told him. Now you have 30 days to figure out how to be one. I walked out the front door and down the steps. The cold air hit my face, crisp and clean. Behind me, the house erupted into chaos. I heard Sarah screaming at Richard. I heard Leo shouting, the sounds of a fracturing foundation. Mitchell walked out a moment later, pulling the front door shut behind him. He walked over to his SUV, tossing the empty manila folder into the passenger seat. Well, Mitchell said, looking over the roof of his car at me. That was spirited. You all right, Tom? I'm fine, I said. And to my surprise, it was the truth. Where to now? I looked at my truck, loaded with 2 bags and a green metal toolbox. South, Florida, maybe. Somewhere I don't have to winterize a lawnmower. Mitchell chuckled. Enjoy the heat. And hey, if you ever buy another place and need to liquidate some terrible relatives, you've got my number. I'll keep that in mind. I got into my truck. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a steady, reliable sound. I put it in gear and pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back at the house on Oak Creek Lane. I didn't look at the oak tree I had planted. I just watched the road ahead, the headlights cutting through the darkening evening, carrying me away from the ghosts, away from the concrete floor, and into a space that finally belonged entirely to me. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that forced you to rewrite the rules of your own life? Family is supposed to be our sanctuary, but sometimes the deepest cuts come from the ones we sheltered. If Thomas's story resonated with you, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth, and subscribe to the channel for more grounded, real-life stories. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in his shoes?